For years, Russia has been waging war against Ukraine, but in many ways, it's been like a heavyweight boxer going up against a fighter who's had one hand tied behind their back. Sure, Ukraine's been receiving plenty of support from the West, especially the United States, but most of that help has come with strings attached. You could say Ukraine's been playing a chess game where it only gets to move a few pawns while Russia swings freely with its whole army. Every American weapon sent to Ukraine has had usage restrictions. Not no shooting, but more like shoot only here, not there. It's like handing someone a bow and arrow, but telling them they can only shoot at targets on their own side of the fence. Putin, the Russian leader, seemed perfectly fine with that setup. Why? Because as long as Ukraine couldn't hit back inside Russia's own backyard, Putin could keep hammering away at Ukraine without worrying about a serious counterattack. But hold on to your helmets, because the tide might be turning thanks to none other than former US President Donald Trump. Yes, you read that right. Trump is reportedly considering wiping out all those Biden-era restrictions on American weapons sent to Ukraine. And if he follows through, it could be game over for Russia. What's Trump cooking? Inside sources in Washington have revealed that Trump is mulling over the removal of every limitation on US weapons previously placed on Ukraine. Some of these restrictions had already been loosened, like when, in November 2024, President Biden gave Ukraine the green light to use US-made Army tactical missile system not just within Ukraine, but also against Russian positions in border regions where Russia was massing troops. But even then, Ukraine was not granted complete freedom to use US weapons however it pleased. That might be about to change dramatically. The Kyiv Post reported that two insiders from the White House hinted at a major shift. One said Trump believes the current status quo isn't working because it doesn't bring Russia to the negotiating table. Trump's tired of watching Putin ignore peace talks and thinks it's time to change the rules of engagement. A clue about what's coming came from a surprising source: German Chancellor Friedrich Merz. Just a day before the news from Washington, Merz announced that Germany, alongside the US, France, and the UK, had lifted restrictions on how Ukraine can use long-range weapons supplied by those countries. Ukraine can now attack military positions inside Russia, Merz declared. Until recently, that was a no-go. If Germany's already opened the door for deep strikes into Russia, Trump might be preparing to throw that door wide open for Ukraine with American weapons too. Think F-16 fighter jets and Bradley fighting vehicles. Previously, those weapons had to stay inside Ukraine or close to the border, but Trump seems ready to let Ukraine take the fight right into Russia itself. Throwing caution to the wind. This is a huge shift in US policy. Up until now, the West's fear of escalating the conflict prevented them from allowing Ukraine to strike inside Russia. The worry was simple: provoke Putin too much, and the war could spiral out of control. But Trump appears ready to throw that fear out the window. If Ukraine can now hit Russian military targets inside Russia, Putin's war machine might finally get a taste of its own medicine. Why the change of heart? The answer lies in frustration. For months, Putin has been saying one thing and doing another. He refuses to agree to ceasefires that could lead to peace talks. Remember when Trump's team helped negotiate a 30-day ceasefire proposal in March with Ukraine's President Zelensky? Putin said no, questioning how that would address the root cause of the conflict, which, spoiler alert, is Russia's refusal to accept Ukraine as an independent nation. Since then, ceasefire talks have been more like a broken record, Putin nodding politely and then breaking promises almost immediately. Russia did not stop fighting during Easter or Victory Day, despite announcements to the contrary. In fact, Putin's actions have repeatedly demonstrated that he's not serious about peace. Putin's games and Trump's patience. Putin's latest no to ceasefires came in May, after European leaders tried to pressure him with new sanctions. The UK Prime Minister, Keir Starmer, summed it up nicely. Putin keeps refusing peace unless it's on his terms that essentially mean erasing Ukraine's sovereignty. Even after Trump had a very meaningful and frank phone call with Putin in May, Russia stuck to its usual script, refusing ceasefires, asking for impossible conditions, and continuing military assaults. Trump's patience has worn thin. The final straw: a massive drone attack on Ukraine in late May. Russia launched an unprecedented swarm of 900 drones targeting Ukrainian cities, killing civilians including children. One day alone saw 355 drones and 9 cruise missiles sent flying towards Ukraine. Despite Ukraine shooting down many, the damage and casualties were severe. Trump was livid. Posting on Truth Social, he called Putin absolutely crazy and accused him of needlessly killing a lot of people. He warned that if Putin wants all of Ukraine, it could mean Russia's own downfall. No more Mr. Nice Guy. Russia tried to spin Trump's outrage as emotional overload, but this time, the tactic did not work. Trump's considering a complete removal of restrictions on U.S. weapons to Ukraine as a direct response to Putin's actions. If Trump lifts the limits, Ukraine could use advanced American weapons to strike deep inside Russia, targeting airbases, command centers, and supply lines. That would throw a wrench into Russia's carefully guarded military infrastructure. Experts like George Rivero, a Russia-Ukraine specialist based in Washington, say this shift could seriously weaken Russia's war effort. With no constraints on U.S. weapons use, Ukraine could disrupt Russia's logistics and command nodes deep inside its own territory, forcing Moscow's forces into chaos. Putin's troops, already stretched thin, would face attacks from weapons they can't effectively defend against. The chaos on the ground could create openings for Ukraine to retake land Russia claimed. Sanctions and pressure to the max. It's not just about weapons. Trump might also push for new sanctions, such as staggering 500% tariffs on Russian oil, gas, and uranium exports. Combine that with relentless military pressure, and Russia's economy and war machine could buckle. All this could happen because Putin refused a ceasefire deal that Trump helped negotiate. Talk about shooting yourself in the foot, or in Putin's case, firing 900 drones. The big meeting and what's next? As of now, the lifting of restrictions isn't official. It's still under review, but signs point to a meeting between Trump and German officials in Washington to discuss the issue. Germany's foreign minister, Johann Wadfall, who recently slammed Putin for wanting to continue the war, is likely to be part of this meeting. Given Germany's earlier move to lift missile restrictions and Wadfall's tough talk, the pressure on Trump to do the same with U.S. weapons is intense. And Trump himself seems to have set a 2-week deadline for Putin to show he really wants peace. On May 28, when asked if Putin wants to end the war, Trump said, "I can't tell you that, but I'll let you know in about 2 weeks. We're gonna find out whether or not he's tapping us along. And if he is, we'll respond a little differently." In other words, if Putin doesn't start playing nice, expect the gloves to come off and expect Ukraine to be armed to the teeth. What happens if the restrictions are lifted? If Trump pulls the trigger on lifting restrictions, Ukraine's military capabilities could skyrocket. According to Rivero, Kyiv could finally unleash precision-guided munitions on Russian airbases, launching drones and bombers, attacking Ukrainian cities. That's a game-changer. Ukraine has been striking inside Russia already, but mostly with its own drones and missiles. Add U.S. weapons to the mix, and Russian air defenses could be overwhelmed. Putin's shield, protecting critical military infrastructure, would crack. That would lead to a weakening of Russian forces on the ground. Without solid supply lines and operational coordination, Russian offensives could fall apart. Ukraine could seize the momentum and start reclaiming territory. A comedy of errors for Putin. It's almost Shakespearean how Putin keeps missing the mark. He says he wants peace but breaks ceasefires. He tries to negotiate but sets impossible demands. He launches record-breaking drone attacks and ends up pushing Trump to arm Ukraine more aggressively. Putin's strategy seems to be a masterclass in self-sabotage. Maybe someone should remind him that stubbornness isn't exactly a winning military tactic. So, should this have been done sooner? Many argue yes. Lifting restrictions earlier might have prevented some of the devastation Ukraine has endured. But geopolitics is never straightforward, and fears of escalation have long held back the West. Now, with Trump apparently ready to flip the script, Ukraine could finally get the freedom to fight back more effectively. Whether that leads to peace or prolongs the war remains to be seen. Do you think lifting U.S. weapons restrictions on Ukraine is the right move? Could it force Putin to the negotiating table, or will it escalate the conflict? Should the West have acted sooner? And how much longer can this war drag on before the world demands a real solution? Drop your thoughts below, and if you want to stay up to date, don't forget to like and subscribe.